Here's something I want you to think about for a moment. The first 2 hours after you wake up, those hours set the biological tone for your entire day. Your hormones, your metabolism, your blood pressure, your brain function, all of it is being shaped by what you do or don't do in that window. And in my years working in medicine, what I've observed is this: the people who consistently age well, who stay sharp, who keep their cardiovascular system strong, they almost always have structured mornings. Not complicated mornings, not expensive mornings, but intentional ones. Today I'm going to walk you through 10 evidence-based morning habits that I personally follow and that I recommend to my patients. These aren't trendy wellness tips. These are habits that show up again and again in the longevity research as genuine drivers of long-term health. And I'll tell you up front, there is not a single supplement in this list, because the research doesn't support spending your money there. What it does support is what I'm about to share with you. My name is Dr. Victor Hayes. I'm a physician with a deep focus on preventive medicine and longevity. And if this kind of content is useful to you, make sure you subscribe, because everything I put out here is grounded in the science, not in what's popular. Let's get into it. Habit number 1 sounds almost too simple, but it is one of the most powerful things you can do for your long-term health, and that is this: wake up at the same time every single day, not just on weekdays, every day, including weekends. Your body runs on what's called a circadian rhythm, your internal 24-hour biological clock. This clock regulates when your hormones are released, when your body temperature rises and falls, when you feel alert, when you feel tired, and a surprising amount of your metabolic function. When you keep your wake time consistent, that system becomes highly efficient. Your body learns to anticipate the day. You start waking up naturally, feeling refreshed because your biology is aligned with your schedule. But when you disrupt that clock, even by a single hour, you are essentially giving yourself a mild form of jet lag, and I see this constantly in patients. They tell me they sleep 8 hours on weekends to catch up, and then they wonder why they feel groggy and unfocused on Monday. That grogginess has a name: social jet lag, and it's a genuine physiological disruption. Research tracking over 60,000 adults found that people with irregular sleep schedules had significantly higher rates of obesity, hypertension, and poor mental health. Independent of how many total hours they were sleeping, that finding is crucial. It tells us that the timing of sleep matters just as much as the quantity. So the prescription here is simple. Pick a wake time, stick to it, even if you went to bed late. Over 2 to 3 weeks, your body will adapt, your sleep will deepen, and your mornings will transform. Habit number 2 is one that I believe will become standard medical practice within a decade. Right now, most people have no idea how well or how poorly their body recovered overnight. What I recommend, and what I do myself, is tracking heart rate variability, or HRV, first thing in the morning. Most modern fitness watches do this automatically overnight. Let me explain what HRV actually tells us. Your heart does not beat like a perfect metronome. There is a natural, healthy variation in the time between heartbeats. Counterintuitively, more variation is better. A high heart rate variability means your autonomic nervous system is flexible and adaptable. Your body is well recovered, not under stress, not fighting infection. A low HRV, or a meaningful drop from your personal average, is often your body telling you something is off. Maybe you had a couple of drinks the night before. Maybe you're coming down with something. Maybe your stress levels have been elevated. The reason this matters for longevity is substantial. Research published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology found that people in the lowest quartile of HRV had more than double the cardiovascular mortality risk compared to those in the highest quartile. That is a powerful number, one simple metric, tracked passively while you sleep, carrying that much predictive information. Checking this first thing in the morning, before you even get out of bed, takes about 30 seconds, and it helps you make smarter decisions about how to approach the day. Push hard today or pull back and recover. Your HRV will guide you. Habit number 3 is something I consider non-negotiable. Get outside within 30 minutes of waking up and expose your eyes to natural light. Here is the biology behind this. Deep inside your brain, there is a tiny region called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It functions as your body clock's headquarters, and it is directly wired to your eyes. When natural light hits your retinas first thing in the morning, it sends a signal. The day has begun. This triggers a healthy rise in cortisol, your alertness hormone. It stimulates serotonin production. And critically, it starts a 14 to 16-hour countdown timer that determines when melatonin will rise at night and when you'll naturally feel sleepy. If you spend your first hour indoors under dim artificial light, or worse, looking at a phone in the dark, you are denying your body clock the signal it needs. The downstream effects ripple through your entire day: flattened mood, reduced focus, lower afternoon energy, and disrupted sleep that night. Here's something important to understand. Even on an overcast or gray day, the light outdoors is many times brighter than indoor lighting. It still works. You do not need sunshine. You need outdoor light. A study from the University of Colorado found that just 1 week of irregular light exposure was enough to shift the circadian clock by up to 2 hours, with measurable downstream effects on sleep quality, mood, and metabolic markers. The system is more sensitive than most people realize. For those of you waking before sunrise, a 10,000 lux light therapy lamp used for 20 to 30 minutes after waking is a well-researched and effective substitute. Step outside, breathe some fresh air, let the light reach your eyes. 5 to 10 minutes is genuinely enough. Habit number 4 surprises people when I mention it, but the evidence behind it is more solid than most people expect. At the end of your morning shower, turn the temperature all the way to cold and stand under it for as long as you can manage. Start with 10 seconds, work up to 60 to 90 seconds over several weeks. What happens physiologically is this. Cold water activates your sympathetic nervous system, your acute stress response, which releases adrenaline and noradrenaline. Your heart rate rises. Blood flow increases to your muscles and brain. You become rapidly and powerfully alert. The subjective experience is difficult to describe if you haven't tried it. You step out of that cold shower and there is a surge of clarity and energy, like someone has pressed a reset button on your nervous system. That feeling lasts well into the morning. Beyond the immediate alertness, there is evidence that regular cold exposure can raise your baseline noradrenaline levels over time. Noradrenaline is associated with improved mood, sharper focus, and greater stress resilience. I want to be transparent here. Some of the more extreme claims around cold therapy are ahead of what the current research can confirm. But a well-conducted randomized controlled trial found that people who ended their showers with 90 seconds of cold water reported a 29% reduction in sick days and significantly lower fatigue compared to the control group. Not bad for something that costs nothing. Give it 2 weeks. The discomfort fades faster than you expect. Habit number 5 is one of the simplest and most widely skipped. Drink a large glass of water before anything else. Before coffee, before food, before your phone. Here is why this matters more than most people realize. By the time you wake up each morning, you have gone 7 to 9 hours without drinking anything. You've been breathing. You've been perspiring gently overnight. You wake up in a state of mild dehydration every single morning. As a result, your blood is slightly more viscous in the early morning hours. Your circulation is working harder. And importantly, the risk of clotting events is elevated in the early morning, which is exactly why we see the highest rates of heart attacks and strokes between 6 and 10 in the morning. Rehydrating promptly counteracts this. It thins your blood back to normal, reduces the load on your cardiovascular system, and measurably improves your focus and mood. Even mild dehydration, just 1 to 2%, is enough to impair concentration, physical performance, and emotional stability. Yet most people reach for coffee first, which is a mild diuretic and compounds the problem. Water first, then coffee. It's a small change with a measurable physiological benefit. Habit number 6 addresses the single biggest dietary mistake I see people making in the morning, and that is starting the day with a carbohydrate-heavy breakfast. Granola, toast with jam, most commercial cereals, pastries. These foods cause your blood glucose to spike sharply within 30 to 60 minutes of eating them. Your pancreas responds by flooding your system with insulin, and roughly 2 hours later, your glucose crashes, and with it, your energy, your concentration, and your mood. You then feel tired, foggy, irritable, and hungry again, and that cycle drives overeating and energy instability for the rest of the day. The solution is to anchor your breakfast in protein and fiber, eggs with vegetables, Greek yogurt with berries and ground flaxseed, smoked salmon with seeded bread and greens. These foods slow glucose absorption, produce a gradual and sustained energy release, and keep you fuller for significantly longer. I also recommend adding a quality fermented food to your morning routine: kefir, plain yogurt with live cultures, or similar. The research on the gut microbiome over the last decade has been nothing short of remarkable. We now understand that gut bacteria are deeply connected to immune function, mental health, inflammation levels, and metabolic health. A landmark study from Stanford found that 2 servings of fermented food daily for 10 weeks consistently increased microbiome diversity and reduced inflammatory markers. Given that chronic low-grade inflammation drives virtually every major chronic disease, that is a finding worth acting on. Build your breakfast around protein, fiber, and healthy fat. Your brain and your bloodstream will function on a completely different level. Habit number 7 is one of the highest leverage metabolic interventions available to you, and it costs nothing. Walk briskly for 20 to 30 minutes after breakfast. Here is the specific mechanism behind this. After you eat, glucose enters your bloodstream from the food you've digested. Normally, your pancreas responds by releasing insulin to shuttle that glucose into your cells. But when you walk after eating, your muscles begin drawing glucose directly from the bloodstream for fuel. This means your pancreas has to do less work. Your post-meal blood sugar curve flattens dramatically. And over weeks and months of doing this consistently, you are systematically reducing the burden on your insulin system, which has profound implications for metabolic health, weight management, inflammation, and long-term disease risk. This becomes increasingly important as we age. Insulin sensitivity naturally declines over time, which is one of the main drivers of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and accelerated aging. A daily post-meal walk works directly against that decline. A large prospective study following over 80,000 adults found that people who walked briskly for at least 75 minutes per week had a 24% lower risk of premature death, 24%, from walking, and those who walked more continued to see greater benefits with no apparent upper threshold. You don't need a gym, you don't need equipment, you need a pair of shoes and 20 minutes. Habit number 8 is about cognitive health, and it is more medically relevant than most people appreciate. After your morning walk, protect a block of time for genuine mental challenge. This means focused work that requires your brain to actually think. Reading, writing, problem solving, learning something new, creative work, not scrolling, not passive consumption, active, demanding cognitive engagement. Here is why this matters for longevity. The brain, like muscle, responds to the demands you place on it. Regular cognitive challenge builds what neuroscientists call cognitive reserve, a kind of neurological resilience that protects against dementia and cognitive decline. Research from the Rush Memory and Aging Project found that people who engaged in cognitively stimulating activities frequently had a rate of cognitive decline approximately 32% lower than those who rarely did. Over decades, that translates into a profound difference in how sharp you remain and how long you stay independent. Do this work in the morning. Cognitive performance peaks in the late morning for most people and declines through the afternoon. Use that window for your most demanding thinking. Save the passive tasks for later. Habit number 9 is going to frustrate some of you, but the physiology is compelling. Delay your first coffee by at least 60 to 90 minutes after waking. Ideally, wait until the 90 to 120 minute mark. Here is why. When you wake up, your body is already producing a natural cortisol surge, your biological alertness signal. Cortisol peaks in the first hour after waking and then gradually declines. If you drink coffee during that cortisol peak, you are essentially layering caffeine on top of a system that is already alert. The effect is less efficient. You build tolerance faster. You're more likely to feel jittery or anxious. And when both the cortisol and caffeine wear off simultaneously, your energy crashes harder. Wait until your cortisol has peaked and begun to fall. Now caffeine steps in precisely where it is most effective, filling the gap in alertness rather than doubling up on it. The lift is cleaner, more sustained, and you build tolerance more slowly. When you do have your coffee, have it black or near black. The evidence base for coffee's health benefits, reduced risk of type 2 diabetes, liver disease, certain cardiovascular conditions, is based on black or lightly modified coffee, not heavily sweetened, syrup-laden drinks. A meta-analysis pooling data from over 2 million people found that 2 to 3 cups of coffee per day was associated with a 17% lower risk of all-cause mortality. That association was strongest for black or filtered coffee. Drink it intentionally. Habit number 10 is the one that gets the most pushback, but the evidence behind it is among the strongest in all of longevity research. Make genuine contact with someone you care about every morning. A voice note, a phone call, a real conversation over breakfast, not a liked post on social media, actual human connection. Here is the science. Loneliness and social isolation are now understood to carry health risks comparable in magnitude to smoking 15 cigarettes per day. That is not a metaphor. That is what large epidemiological studies have repeatedly found. At a population level, people with strong social ties consistently live longer, have lower rates of cardiovascular disease, lower rates of dementia, and lower rates of depression. The biological mechanisms run through cortisol regulation, immune function, and inflammatory pathways. A major meta-analysis drawing on data from over 300,000 people found that strong social relationships were associated with a 50% increased likelihood of survival. That effect size puts human connection on par with quitting smoking and far ahead of most medical interventions in terms of population-level impact. The morning is when most people have the mental space to engage genuinely, rather than firing off a distracted message at the end of a busy day. 2 minutes, one voice note, one real conversation. The cumulative effect over years is significant, and it costs you nothing. Before I close, I want to mention one more habit that I follow weekly rather than daily, and that is monitoring your own health metrics. Once a week, I check my blood pressure, record my weight, and measure my waist circumference. I plot these numbers on a simple graph so I can see trends over time. I know some of you are thinking, that's excessive. I'm healthy. I don't need to track that. But here is the medical reality. Hypertension and insulin resistance can be silently developing for a decade or more before any symptoms appear or any formal diagnosis is made. By the time your doctor catches something at an annual checkup, you may have been carrying that risk for years. When you track weekly, you catch trends early, when they are still easy to reverse through lifestyle rather than medication. The Global Burden of Disease study identified high blood pressure as the single leading modifiable risk factor for death worldwide, responsible for around 10 million deaths annually. The majority of those people had no idea their blood pressure was elevated until damage had already been done. Don't wait for someone else to monitor your health. A blood pressure monitor costs less than a week of supplements. Buy one, use it weekly, track the trend. Let me pull this together. 10 habits, not 10 supplements, not 10 purchases, 10 behaviors that are grounded in the research and that compound powerfully over time. Consistent sleep timing, tracking your recovery, morning light exposure, cold water therapy, hydration before anything else, a protein and fiber breakfast, a post-meal walk, protected deep work time, delayed, intentional coffee, and genuine human connection. You don't need to do all of these perfectly from day one. Start with 2 or 3, build from there. The compounding effect of small, consistent changes over months and years is where the real transformation happens. This is the core message of everything I do on this channel. Prevention is consistently easier, cheaper, and more effective than treatment. and the morning is where prevention begins. If this was useful to you, please share it with someone who needs it. Leave a comment below telling me which habit you're going to start first. I read every single one. I'll see you in the next video.